Next on Newsmax Prime, it's the day after the big debate. Who finished first in the last GOP encounter of the year? We'll talk about it. And we'll also talk with Sarah Palin. Her Alaska home is not that far from the North Pole, and she's made her list of who's naughty and nice in an exclusive review of some of the Republican contenders. Plus, the speaker is bad Santa? Maybe that's not why Paul Ryan grew his beard, but he's about to give a gift to President Obama that could prove dangerous. Newsmax Prime starts now. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, our post-debate debriefing. No one Republican ran the table last night in Las Vegas, but the GOP frontrunner ran into a frustrated former Florida governor.
I think Jeb is a very nice person. He's a very nice person, but we need tough people. We need toughness. We need intelligence, and we need tough. Jeb said when they come across the southern border, they come as an act of love.
You said in September 30th that ISIS was not a
Am I talking or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm talking right now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not talking. You interrupted me,
September 30th,
Jeb. Are you going to apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yeah, one at a time.
Excuse me. Am I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So,
little of your
again,
own medicine there.
I know you're trying to build up your energy, Jeb, but it's not working
one at a
very
time.
well.
Yeah.
Look.
Donald, you're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
Well, adding insult to injury for Jeb, the turnout last night at his Miami headquarters for a debate-watching party, not exactly a standing room only crowd, under 50 people. That's the populated picture, the second one we're showing you right now. About to populate your screen from Newsmax New York, my Newsmax colleague, Dennis Michael Lynch, whose new program, Dennis Michael Lynch Unfiltered, will premiere here on Newsmax TV early next year. DML, Donald Trump did a pretty good job keeping his composure while Jeb seemed to be somewhat agitated. Your take on that dust-up?
Well, listen, look, Donald Trump said it all. He's at 41, 42%. Jeb Bush is on a respirator. So Jeb Bush is going to do everything he possibly can to try to knock Trump down and pick himself up along the way. But honestly, it's time for Jeb Bush to just punch the card. It's time to go home. He's done. Donald Trump is going, I said it last night, he's going to rise in the polls. He's going to keep on rising in the polls because he's saying the right thing. He is focusing on immigration and keeping Americans safe. And that's what people want, JD. That's what Americans want.
So, speaking of immigration, you and I have been concerned about that for a long, long time. It was a hot topic leading to some fireworks between a couple of young senators, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. They were arguing about who has the better record on the issue. Let's take a look.
Ted, you support legalizing people who are in this country illegally. Ted Cruz supported a 500% increase in the number of H-1B visas, the guest workers that are allowed into this country, and Ted supports doubling the number of green cards. So I think what's important for us to understand is there is a way forward on this issue that we can bring our country together on. And when I'm president, I will do it. And it will begin by bringing illegal immigration under control and proving it to the American people.
Dana.
Senator Cruz.
Look, I understand that Marco wants to raise confusion. It is not accurate what he just said, that I supported legalization. Indeed, I led the fight against his legalization and amnesty bill.
Pretty animated back and forth, Dennis. Who is right during that encounter?
Actually, I think they're both wrong. But ultimately, on the one thing I want to focus on right here is with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz said, I actually think he may even use the word lie, that Marco Rubio was lying. Marco Rubio was not lying. Ted Cruz proposed legislation that would increase H-1B visas to 325,000 people per year. The majority of those people come from the Middle East region. You tell me, how is the United States going to process 325,000 visas? So you've got the national security problem, and then of course it's what that does to the American worker. It kicks them right in the shins. But just to focus on what was last night, which was basically about ISIS and terrorism and trying to control immigration. Ted Cruz can't have it both ways. And he was pushing, he was just touting the fact that he had tried that legislation up about 6 months ago. He was in front of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and he was saying, hey, I want to have all these people come in. About 3 weeks ago, he started changing his tune because Americans are starting to chime into the fact that, hey, this is dangerous. We're taking all these people in on visas and we're taking these refugees. So he changed his tune. But Marco Rubio was spot on. And I'm not a big Marco Rubio fan, especially when it comes to immigration. And that's why I say he was wrong, too. He says we have to, I think he said, what was it, limit illegal immigration? No, we need to eliminate illegal immigration, and that's why Donald Trump is kicking butt and taking names.
Yeah, the bottom line is those two guys in the Senate, they're highly capable, both telegenic and smart, but there's a little bit of the Senate shuffle going on when it comes to illegal immigration, and you're right, that's why Trump is riding high. Hey, let's have Tim Graham join our conversation. Tim's the director of media research at the Media Research Center. He's joining us from just outside Washington, D.C. in Reston, Virginia. And Tim, before last night's debate, your research center said the following. Number one, the questions will be aimed at getting the candidates to fight with one another. Number two, Donald Trump will end up with more airtime than any of his competitors. And number three, the moderators will start gobbling up the valuable airtime. Were you 3 for 3, or just how accurate were those pre-debate predictions?
It is pretty much par for the course. I mean, we found the moderators are taking about 20% of the time. We find that Donald Trump gets the most airtime to talk, in part because he comes under attack the most. It was a little more even last night because you saw that there was some real Cruz-Rubio fighting going on there, as well as Jeb and Trump fighting. The rating was just the same. We had 18 million viewers tuning in last night, so it's still a hot property to watch. I thought the questions were fairly good. There wasn't a real serious skew. There were a couple of odd ones, but a pretty good night for Republican voters to assess what they're looking at.
Yeah, it is very curious, and just for the record, Dennis Michael Lynch, as we're going through Tim's predictions, NPR monitored the speaking time, and the way they had it, Ted Cruz got more time than anybody last night. When we look at last night's debate, and we've talked about the Cruz-Rubio dynamic and Trump sailing on through, there's another guy who really made a splash last night, DML, and that's Governor Chris Christie. Did he accurately move into the role of a pseudo-outsider last night?
I think he's going to make a move. I really do. I mean, I think trying to chase Trump is almost, a Herculean effort. But I would like to see, JD, I'd like to see these other people who don't have a chance. I mean, I appreciate anybody who tries to run for office, you know this. I mean, you've got to give them a bunch of kudos because it's not easy on your family. It's not easy on your body, on anything. And so I give a lot of credit. But it's time for Bush and Fiorina and Kasich and Paul to move over so we could really focus on the people who have a chance. I think Chris Christie does move into that bunch. But I just want to see Rubio, and I want to see Cruz, Trump, Christie, and I don't know, maybe one other person up there debating it and have everybody else go home. I don't think the American people are really going to be able to zero in on their candidates until that happens.
I want to see more of Tim Graham and get his take since he's doing all that media research there on the banks of the Potomac. Tim, I'm just kind of curious. While it's true that Wolf Blitzer and his CNN colleagues were not in full John Harwood snarkiness mode, there were some questions that seemed to be tinged with the viewpoint of the left. Is that just something that people have gotten used to? And why on earth does Reince Priebus and the GOP give these debates to leftist networks instead of Newsmax TV?
Yeah. We have here at the MRC tried to make a big deal out of how we need conservative moderators, conservative journalists, conservative talk show hosts to get in there because this is a primary election process for conservative voters, for Republican voters. They on some level would say, well, we want those viewers. Well, again, we had this thing last night where even Hugh Hewitt, who's brought in to be sort of a conservative radio host, is asking this weird question to Ben Carson about how if he's tough enough to order bombings of thousands of innocent children. It was just a bizarre question you would expect somebody from the liberal direction to ask. And then they have these Facebook questions, and somebody asked basically if our position on immigration or on refugees was contrary to the Bible. This is not a question Democrats ever get as to whether they're contrary to the Bible.
Of course not. That's why you do such good work at the Media Research Center. Tim Graham on the banks of the Potomac. Dennis Michael Lynch from Newsmax New York. Gentlemen, you have our thanks. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, I spoke with 2008 Republican vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin in an exclusive one-on-one interview earlier this week. She talked about the candidates and in particular which candidate the so-called Reagan voters would support in a matchup between the two current GOP frontrunners, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump.
I think we would be very fortunate to face such a thing because both are fighters for America and certainly are much more independent than a few of the candidates that are in there that I would consider more part of the establishment. The status quo, going along to get along, we don't need any more of that. That got us into this mess. So yeah, that'd be a good problem to have.
And we will have a little more from Sarah Palin a little bit later on in this program, only on Newsmax Prime here on Newsmax TV. And we asked you last night to weigh in on who you think won the debate. And here are the latest results. Donald Trump comfortably in the lead with 77%, Ted Cruz at 14%, the rest of the field in single digits. Now there is still time for you to weigh in. You can cast your vote by getting on the internet and going to newsmaxpolls.com. That's newsmaxpolls.com. We're back with more after this.